Hey everyone, it's Matt from The Homemade Chef. Thank you so much for stopping by and for following us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, and of course on the blog itself at homemade-chef.com. Happy Sunday. As you've seen on the blog this week, it is all about Thanksgiving. And as I always say, Thanksgiving is so stressful. You've got family you're entertaining, and of course you've got the bird you've got to cook. One of the things that I love to do is make the soup ahead of time. It freezes really well, and it's one less thing that you have to do on Thanksgiving. So I'm going to show you today how to make my spiced sweet potato and apple soup. This soup is delicious. It's like a warm fall hug. Just like a sweater. So let's get started. What I've got here is about 2 pounds of sweet potatoes, and I'm just keeping it in some water. I've chopped most of it already in about a 1-inch dice. And the thing with sweet potato is you just want to be really careful. It's really hard to cut. So cut it on a flat surface and just make sure that you're really clear of where your hands are. Keep your fingers away from the knife and just cut it into big 1 or so inch chunks. And you can just put it in the water to keep it from browning. All right, and one more. And last one. One of the things that I actually do is I roast the sweet potato before I make the soup. I think it just makes it a little bit sweeter. So I'm just gonna take all of this big handful onto a sheet pan lined with clean kitchen towel. Just want to get it really dry so that it roasts really well. It's going to cook in a preheated 425 degree oven for 35 minutes to an hour, depending on the size of your dice and if your oven runs hot or not. It might take a little longer or less longer. All right, so this is nice and dry. So I'm just gonna, without getting it all over the kitchen, turn it out. And then what I've also got here is 2 Granny Smith apples, and I'm just gonna slice these off the core. And same thing, just big pieces. The apple, I think, adds a really nice, like, sweet, savory thing. I think it's a nice, unexpected flavor in the soup. Put this all in the pan. Second one. All right. Nice to be able to get this out of the way before Thanksgiving. We're gonna have more blog posts coming up talking about side dishes, my famous 5-ingredient stuffing, gravy, all those delicious things that you're used to seeing on Thanksgiving. All right, so now what I'm gonna do is just toss this together with a good amount of olive oil, salt and pepper. The thing about this soup is it's sweet and savory at the same time, so we wanna make sure that we get a good balance of both. So I find that you want a little bit more salt than you probably think you need. But we'll season every step of the way, as we always do. And then just toss this together. Clean hands are a chef's best friend. And you see I've actually got a lot here. And because we're gonna roast this, I don't want the vegetables to steam. And if I cook them like this, they're gonna steam. So what I have is another pan. These are well-used roasting pans. That's okay. So I'm just gonna split it up and put about half on one pan and about half on the other. Maybe a little more over here. That looks great. So as I said, 425 degree oven for 35 minutes to an hour, and we're just gonna pop these in and we'll see you on the other side. Hey everyone, welcome back. It's been about 40 minutes and we're gonna continue on with the soup. What I have here in the pot is about 1.5 yellow onions and 3 stalks of celery, finely diced. And I've just been cooking it in some oil and butter for about 10 minutes or so till it's translucent. And I think the vegetables are done. It smells delicious in here. It smells like fall. Oh my goodness. These look delicious. They're perfectly roasted. The apples are starting to sort of fall apart. They look a little bit brown, maybe even a little bit burnt. But one of the things about roasting is that's great flavor. So we're actually going to use all of that in the soup. So once you get your onions and celery nice and translucent and fully cooked through, we're gonna go ahead and add all of this deliciousness. Just grab a nice big spatula and just dump this all in the soup. Just try not to get it all over your kitchen. All those brown bits, that's gonna add this delicious caramelized flavor to the soup. You can see my trusty assistant is always helpful in the kitchen. So just add this all in. Then what we're gonna do is we're gonna check the seasoning. We're gonna add tons of delicious fall warming spices. All right, let's go. So just mix this in. It's gonna look a little thick right now, and that's okay. This is over medium-high heat. I'm actually using a stainless steel pot, like a Dutch oven, but any heavy bottom pot, I just think you get better heat distribution. So now what we're gonna do is add the spices. And so what I've got is about a teaspoon of cinnamon. And this is real-time cooking, people. I'm making this up as I go along. About a teaspoon of cinnamon. About half a teaspoon ground ginger. I'm gonna add for now about a teaspoon of cardamom. I really like the flavor of cardamom. I think it's really good in this soup. About an eighth of a teaspoon of cloves. Cloves are really spicy, got a lot of flavor. And about the same, about an eighth of a teaspoon of allspice. If you're thinking gingerbread, that's pretty much what we're trying to create in this soup. And about half a teaspoon, maybe a little less, of nutmeg. I'm actually not a big nutmeg fan, but I do think it's good in this soup. And the reason that I add it now, before I add the broth, is I actually want it to toast a little bit to release the oils and the spices, which I think makes the soup a little bit nicer when you go to eat it. Smells delicious. And the last thing that I'm gonna do before I add the broth is I'm gonna add a little white sherry. I think that the nuttiness of the sherry just really brings out the flavor in the soup. But as Julia Child, the infamous chef she was, always said, you must taste the sherry before you cook with it. So just pour a little bit of sherry and just make sure it's delicious. And it is. I'm gonna add about a quarter of a cup of sherry. I'm just gonna let that cook down. If you don't drink, or you're serving kids, or you just don't want to, you can certainly leave the sherry out. But I think it makes a really nice flavor to the soup. All right, so believe it or not, that's all absorbed already. So what I have now is 2 quarts of homemade chicken stock. I know it's a pain to make homemade chicken stock. It's a little frozen still. But I really do think it makes all the difference in the world. It's super easy to make. If you're lucky, maybe in a week or 2, we'll make some here on the Homemade Chef together. It's a great thing to make on Sundays. It takes a while to make, but if you're staying at home and you're not really doing anything for the day, it's perfect to make. You've got it for months in the freezer, and it's absolutely delicious. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna let this just cook down and cook together. And then in a few minutes, we'll test the seasoning, make sure that we've got our flavors balanced right. And then we're gonna blend it up, and I'll talk to you about my tips on blending hot soups, because you need to be very careful. And then we're gonna test this. I'll see you in a few. All right, we're back, and we've brought the soup up to a nice simmer. It's been cooking for about 10-15 more minutes. And you can see it's really coming together. You've got that dark, rich color from all that caramelization. And so now what we're gonna do is we're actually gonna blend it. If you have an immersion blender, you could use that here. I don't have one. You know what? I really don't think that you need one, but I'm just gonna use a blender. You just gotta be really careful. Let me show you what to do. So I'm gonna take this over very carefully. I'm just gonna take a large ladle. And the 2 things you want to make sure is that you never fill your blender more than half full, and you always cover the top. This is boiling hot soup, and no one needs hot soup all over themselves and the kitchen. So what you're gonna do is just fill this up. Oh, these flavors smell delicious. Wish it was Thanksgiving today so we could eat this today, but I will resist. We'll only do taste tests. So about halfway full, twist it on, and then what I always do is secure the lid and then take a kitchen towel and fully cover the top. And that way, if anything comes up, it'll catch in the towel instead of all over your face. So I'm gonna turn this on. Just blend it until it's smooth. We don't want to puree it. Nobody wants baby food. We're trying to make soup here. And then we're gonna take this and just dump it into a clean pot. Oh my goodness, does that look good? I'm gonna blend the rest of this and I'll show you how to finish the soup. All right, so I've got all the soup blended and it looks absolutely delicious in this pot. It's just a beautiful consistency, a beautiful color. It smells like fall. One last thing that I'm gonna add is about 2 tablespoons of maple syrup. Not the fake stuff, the real good dark maple syrup. That's just gonna add another level of flavor and complexity to the soup. So just mix that in. And then one of the things you always wanna do when you're cooking is you always wanna taste as you go. Just get all your tasting spoons, put them in a glass, keep them next to what you're cooking, and that way you can taste as you go and make sure your soup is really delicious. So I'm just gonna You get all the warming spices, the cardamom, the apple adds a nice little tartness to the soup. But I think it needs 2 more things. A little bit more salt, just a pinch. And you can never have too much sherry. So I'm gonna add a little bit more sherry, a couple tablespoons more. Just mix that in. And how easy is that? We've pretty much got the soup ready to go. Just gonna taste this one more time. Perfect. That is delicious. Your appetizer for Thanksgiving is done. Congratulations. We're gonna let this cool, we're gonna freeze it, and take it out probably 2 days in advance, let it thaw in the refrigerator, and we're gonna heat it back up, and right before we serve it, we're probably gonna add a little bit of heavy cream, which is gonna just make it velvety and delicious and extra decadent. And I usually serve this with a whipped cream, believe it or not, on top. A combination of whipped cream and creme fraiche. And I whip up the cream, no sugar or anything like that, maybe a little more sherry, and just top it, and the whipped cream melts into the soup, and it's absolutely delicious. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and I hope you make our soup. Happy Thanksgiving. We'll talk to you soon. Bon appetit.